Everyone. In this video, I'll be going over some scholarship on the book of 1 Enoch and some of the history behind it. Then I'll address some of the questions like the canonicity of the first book of Enoch. So let's just jump right in. The book of 1 Enoch was not just a singular composed book during one particular time. It seems to have been written by different authors in different time periods. And we know this for a few lines of evidence that we can see. One line of evidence is its internal evidence, as in the historical references within the book. And second, we have some paleography, as in the handwriting and the language and the phrases by the scribes that are copied within it, or the copies that we continue to find. The book of 1 Enoch is divided into sections. Chapters 1 through 36 we call the Book of Watchers. Chapters 37 through 71 is the Book of Parables. Chapters 72 through 82 is the Astronomical Book. Chapters 83 through 90 is the Book of Dreams. And chapters 93 verses 1 through 10 and 91 verses 11 through 17 are seen as the Apocalypse of Weeks. We then have chapters 91 verses 1 through 19, and chapter 92 verses 1 through 5, chapter 93 verses 11 through chapter 105 verse 2. We see this as the exhortation and epistle of Enoch. Then we have chapters 106 and 107 as the book of Noah, and then finally chapter 108 as another book of Enoch. So I'll be focusing mainly on chapters 1 through 36 today. But I'll dabble into some of these other ones as well, so you guys can kind of see some points. But we'll be dealing with whether or not this is a book of canon or not later in a second here too. So there are some concerns within the dating of the book of 1 Enoch, and specifically chapters 1 through 36, but the consensus of the dating method among scholars seems to be somewhere around 200 to 300 BC. According to a scholar named Archie Wright, it's difficult to date to an exact precision because, again, 1 Enoch is not a single work of one author. It wasn't composed during one particular time frame. So most scholars today think that 1 Enoch was originally written in Aramaic. However, our manuscripts are mainly in Ethiopian and in Greek fragments. Now, to the questions of the canon, first I'd like to address the question about whether or not the Jews accepted 1 Enoch as a part of the Bible. So I would say it may be true that some sects of Jews did see this as a part of Scripture. A good scholarly source on this is Michael Heiser. He has some stuff on this to where some of the Jews appear to think that it was. And some of the reasons that are given is many books within the Second Temple Jewish period drew heavily on First Enoch. They were really relying on some details given in here. So it does seem clear that at least some Jews did see this as sacred, as it explained some of the early Genesis story, Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 through 4 to be specific. So a lot of the works from the time of the Second Temple period were using some of the ideas within 1 Enoch. For example, the Book of Jubilees is one of the examples that are normally given, as it has some very Enochian type ideas. And this, how you feel about the Book of Jubilees will depend on your division of Christianity. For example, if you're a Protestant, you may not think that the Book of Jubilees gives any credence to this idea, but if you're a Catholic, you might, just depending on where and how you kind of come about. But we also have some Jews that produced, we call it a Pesher text, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But really what it means, it's an interpretation. It's kind of where we get our modern commentaries today. That's basically all it is. It's an ancient commentary. And there are some mentions of this within some of the commentaries, within these interpretations, or however you want to recall to it. So that right there is pretty significant as well, that you don't write commentaries as Jews on stuff that isn't important. For example, you write it on stuff that you think is important. So it's very difficult to say on those ends, but it's at least true that at least some Jews saw it as scripture or as a canonized book. Now, continuing on, did the early Christians see 1 Enoch as scripture? Well, again, it seems to be very similar. It does seem that some did. To surprise, many Christians really did think that it was a part of the. Maybe it wasn't a part of the canon, but they did see it as at least some way or another. They call it scripture, which is really interesting. One of the first examples of this is the Epistle of Barnabas, written somewhere around 130 A.D. He describes 1 Enoch as quote-unquote scripture. Another famous figure from the early Christians is Tertullian, and he was a figure well known for his work on the Trinitarian doctrines, but he uses the same word, scripture, in the context of 1 Enoch, and he quotes 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 16 to support his ideas, which is just, again, pretty fascinating to me. Irenaeus, who lived from 130 to 200 AD, acknowledged and accepted the views of 1 Enoch. It appears in his very famous work of Against Heresies, section 1. And I'll read a brief section of it so that you can kind of get my point here. He says in section 1, quote, "And the angels who transgressed and became apostates, together with their ungodly and unrighteous and the wicked and profane among men into everlasting fire," end quote. So, this is a controversial one, I should say, because some think that Irenaeus is just quoting 2 Peter 2:4 and Jude verse 6, which very well could be true, but the vocabulary he uses may seem to be fitting closer to 1 Enoch. So, to conclude with this, 1 Enoch is a complicated piece of literature, and debate on it, belonging to Scripture, continues today. And I've outlined a few historical reasons here why you could think that it might be a part of the Bible. However, myself, I'm agnostic to the claim about whether or not it really should belong as Scripture. I don't necessarily consider it Scripture, but I'm very open to evidence and more reason, for example, for someone to say that it should be a part of it. So I find it intriguing, and it's an amazing book. I think it gives us some amazing insights about the Genesis 6 story, because that Genesis 6 story, Genesis 6 doesn't really give you much. You just float into the story, and it doesn't give you any extra details. And that's what I really appreciate about 1 Enoch. I think it really tries to explain those really difficult things that's happening there, and that's why I think it's super important that we, regardless of whether you think that the book is a part of the Bible or not a part of the Bible, I think it's important that we read it. I think early Christians would have read it, regardless of how they felt about it as well. And I think we have evidence that they did that, while some had just fully believed that it was Scripture. So I'll leave it up to you guys. What do you guys think? Do you guys think it is or isn't a part of Scripture? Whatever you guys think, let me know down in the comment section below. And like and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you.